Right, so it's back to school for learners in Gauteng tomorrow, or for some. Once everybody is placed in schools, there's still a question around whether or not children will be at school some of the time or all of the time if rotational teaching continues or not. That is the question. The Basic Education Minister, Angie Motshekga, has raised the alarm about the consequences if rotational learning continues. But she says the department is still consulting with the Department of Health. Motshekga addressed the media about the opening of schools today. To discuss, we're joined by Basil Manuel from Union Naptosa and Rahima Essop, who is the head of communications and advocacy for the Zero Dropout Campaign. Let me start with you, Mr. Manuel. There's no union for learners. Maybe concerned parents get together and things like that. But are you worried about the placements? Because we're using that figure of 1,400. But those who haven't been placed, there's a whole swath still who have been kicked out for other reasons. They were late, or they didn't have their documentation, or they didn't know what's going on. Do you have a stance on that?
Yes, we do. Good afternoon, and good afternoon to Rahima as well. First of all, let me say we believe that the online application system is the best system to have. That there are kinks in the system is true. If your car breaks down, you don't go back to the ox wagon. You fix the car. But the problem is that these issues have been dogging us for a couple of years. And that is my irritation with what is happening now. The same problems seem to be presenting themselves over and over again. And of course, this places pressure on our teachers as well. Because when a child arrives late in grade 1, you've already started inducting all the other children, and then you have to start all over again with an individual child. Friends have been formed and so on, and I can go on and on about the problems of arriving late in a school system. So we need to do something more. So I'm saying to the Gauteng Education Department that they can do better. I believe that the system is working. The number of problems are relatively small, but for those who have the problem, it's an enormous problem.
And this system was meant to be sort of a pilot, a test for a model that could be used across other provinces. Is that still the case, Mr. Manuel?
Yes, insofar as I know, it's still the case already now. Some other provinces have started utilizing the same system. We know that the northern provinces have tried the same system. The coastal provinces have different systems. But as I say, I believe the system is beginning to show that it is working, and working quite well. We now just need to iron out the kinks.
Ms. Essop, your stance, you're mainly concerned about dropouts, but are you concerned about kids who may have to start late because of placement problems?
Absolutely. Good afternoon, Francis. Just to Basil's point, it is concerning that year after year, learners are struggling to get placed. Children have the right to basic education, and not getting placement means their right cannot be realized. And once these learners are enrolled, we also need to monitor absenteeism to ensure that these learners do stay in and are supported to succeed in school. We do find that administrative hurdles like getting placed and sometimes not having the right documentation can act as a hindrance to the right to basic education, which is unfortunate.
Do you agree it's a promising system if the kinks are ironed out?
It could be possibly a system that will work, but we need the kinks to be sorted out. There are lots of technological issues that need to be sorted out when it comes to the basic education sector, and I believe that this is one of them.
Ms. Essop, staying with you, there was a figure that was used in the media briefing today, which is just absolutely mind-blowing. The Educational Director General was saying that the projected number of dropouts due to COVID is 700,000 learners. Does that concur with what you've been concerned about?
Yes, so last year, NIDSCRAM, which is a nationally representative survey, estimated that there were an additional 500,000 learners out of school during the pandemic compared to pre-pandemic figures. That would bring the number to around 700,000 in total. So since then, the DBE has released its own statistics based on enrollment data for 2021, and that showed that higher than normal rates of non-attendance during the pandemic have largely not translated into permanent dropout. So we don't know how many of these learners who have not attended school are going to permanently drop out of school. And today, the minister also mentioned that in the coming days, they will provide a more accurate picture of retention and dropout once enrollment numbers for 2022 are in and are processed. But even if the rates of dropout are lower than what NIDS-CRAM suggests, or are even lower than the projected 700,000, we are concerned about the ripple effect of disrupted learning, that this ripple effect will be felt in the years to come, especially considering the setbacks that we've seen in early grade reading. You know, Francis, we've said this before and we'll say it again, that when it comes to getting an accurate handle of dropout in the country, we need accurate big picture data so that we can monitor trends and act accordingly. And schools need to be able to use learner level data to preempt and prevent dropout by initiating what we call early warning systems that are based on a set of indicators of disengagement. Yeah. And then only will we have a precise picture of dropout in the country when we have these accurate data sets.
Hopefully it's lower than 700,000. I mean, that is just incredible. I'd like to talk to both of you about rotational learning. Let's start with Mr. Manuel. Naptosa, I understand, has called for an end to rotational learning.
Absolutely. What we have asked for is that we review the system. We know what is there in law. We know that certain things are not in place to ensure that all the learners get to school. We know that there are overcrowded classes, but this is part of the problem. We're 2 years down the line, and some of those that the overcrowding has still not been attended to. Rahima has made reference to early grade reading. It's the reading, it's the writing, and the mathematics in the lower grades that are seriously affected. We've seen grade 3s now that will enter the system. We will see that they can't read and write with basic sentences. And by now they should have mastered that. And then, of course, add to this, when you look at the other side of the spectrum, matriculants for 2022 that have been at school for 50% of the time in grade 10 and grade 11. What is it that we expect as an outcome there? We cannot continue with rotational learning. Yeah. It is not a system that can work. And we know it was for very good reasons that we have supported that. But we now need to look at things a bit differently because we know more.
Are you speaking to the Department of Health? Because apparently one of the issues raised by the basic education minister is that the social distance parameters have to be reduced. That's the domain of the Department of Health.
Absolutely. And of course, the Command Council. So on Friday coming, Naptosa and the other teacher unions meet not with the Department of Health, but our scientists. And in the person of Professor Mahdi will be speaking with us, because we too have always said that we want to base our arguments on the science, not just on a warm, fuzzy feeling. And that is going to inform what we say to the Department of Health, what we say to the Department of Education. But certainly, above all other things, we want safety in schools, but we also want our learners back in school. We cannot afford this any longer.
Yeah. Ms. Essop, I mean, has rotational learning added to the dropout rate? People talk of disruptions generally to families who need routines. And what are the consequences of this? People are talking about an entire generation undereducated. Some of the consequences we can't even contemplate yet.
Yeah, so learning losses are going to be felt down the line, and education researchers are raising legitimate concerns about the impact on matric pupils 10 years from now whose learning was disrupted at a critical phase in their education. And Basil mentioned mathematics as well as writing, and I mentioned early grade reading. So it's expected that we will see weaker educational outcomes for the basic education sector as a whole. And when these learners enter the job market, they may end up earning on average 5% less in their lifetimes if World Bank estimates are anything to go by. For those who have dropped out, it's already tough to find a job in this climate, but you're more likely to find employment with a matric certificate than without. So the long-term effects of learning losses and dropout is going to be felt down the line. We know that dropout is not a singular event. It's not something that happens overnight. Dropout is a process of disengagement in which a learner is pushed or pulled away from school because of factors at home, at school, and in their communities. Now, as you rightly said, COVID-19 has amplified the disruptions that typically lead to dropout, exacerbating socioeconomic challenges for households, hunger, joblessness, access to school meals, gender-based violence, increase in pregnancies, loss of access to psychosocial support, as well as important state-sponsored services that would usually be found in the school space. Not to mention the learning losses that have been experienced. We know, according to researchers, that between March 2020 and June 2021, most primary school learners lost up to a full year of learning relative to the 2019 cohort.
Ms. Essop, we've run out of time. In 10 seconds, does rotational learning, does it add to the dropout rate or not?
So that's a difficult question to answer, and I think the pandemic has presented us with all near impossible questions to answer. What I can say is that vaccinations are going to be important going forward, and that when that is ramped up, it's hoped that things will gradually return to normal. We need things to return to normal so that learners are not suffering learning losses and that they have enough contact time with their teachers in order to appropriately deal with dropout going forward.
All right, and we'll follow what the ultimate dropout is. Projections for now are saying 700,000 pupils could have left school because of COVID, because of what's going on. Thank you very much, both of you, for your time. That was Rahima Essop, Head of Communication and Advocacy at Zero Dropout Campaign, as well as Naptosa Executive Director Basil Manuel.